We
Okay.
still should be able to, over here, when she rings in, we should be able to get it. So, yeah.
Okay.
Good. And it
My
should be
four
recording
readers
that.
at this. Everybody else, start in the front. Jimmy. Jimmy.
Jimmy.
Go to the front. Go ahead. Stay right there. Front. Zeke. Keep going. Everybody else in my group at this table.
Okay,
Oh, well, you didn't even send it. Did you get it?
I got it.
Okay, let me see here.
Is that it?
There we are. Can
Okay.
you see me?
Yes.
Awesome. Great.
Okay, I'm going to turn my computer while they walk in.
Turn around. This table, right? This is not right. What's right here? This is our table. So here we go. We're getting there. Go all the way down.
Following directions sometimes.
Deb, I'm going to run over to the restroom here. My colleague John
Okay.
maybe can an overview of the battle.
Okay.
Where we are with.
Okay.
Okay, you think you're good? Yeah, we'll try it. Okay. Tell me if it's it.
Hey, quickly. Okay, could I get you three ladies to slide down, please?
Yeah, I guess so.
Thank you. Okay, do we still need Mrs. Adams' class?
Yeah, they're late.
Mrs. Adams' class, we still need them, right?
Yep, they're coming down. So.
Okay. They're on their way.
Very good.
Okay, who's asking questions? Okay, so when you go up to the microphone, you have to talk slowly so that they can, because there's a little bit of noise. And then you need to speak loudly. I have to repeat questions, which is fine. But if you speak slowly and loudly, it should be good. You can do that. Okay, last group is coming down the stairs.
They're still gathering.
Yep, we're still gathering. Some days we are not a well-oiled machine. Huh?
Guys, those of you with 9 questions, you're going to sit here in this first table, okay? So you have 9 questions.
Everybody else, let's go. Yes. Mrs. Adams, we do have some spots over here if we need to. You are reading a question. You need to be at this table.
You do not sit there. Go over to the circle table.
Right here. Okay, there's some chairs back there. All right. Okay. If I could have your attention, please. We are fortunate this morning to have Barbara Sanders from the National Park Service all the way in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. She is very busy with lots of field trips coming in, but has taken time out of her day to do this virtual field trip so that she can share some great knowledge about Gettysburg, and we'll have an opportunity to answer ask her some questions towards the end. I need you to be good listeners. I have tilted my computer so that she can see you. So you need to fill this out as we go along. Most of these answers will come at the end. All right, Barbara, I'm going to turn it over to you. Here we go, round 2.
Thank you so much. It's nice. I can see almost everybody there. It's nice, Mrs. Masker, to set this up so that you have an opportunity to kind of visit places that you can't go on your field trip. I'm wondering where you do go on field trips there. Where do you typically go on a field trip?
This is about it, really.
It's about it, really, yeah. Field trips are, even virtual field trips, are a lot of extra effort on behalf of your teachers to provide experiences for you. So make sure that you thank everyone involved. How many of you have anybody ever been to Gettysburg before in person? No, okay. All right. So Gettysburg National Military Park is about 6,000 acres. It is to preserve, protect the grounds associated with 2 things. 1, the Battle of Gettysburg, and 2, President Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. And we have about over 1 million people, used to be over 1.5 million people who visit us from all over the country and all over the world every year. And they really explore the first day of the battle, the second day of the battle, the third day of the battle. We have a museum with artifacts as well. We have ranger programs. We have guides who take 2-hour tours of all of the fields. And they explore the leaders, General Lee from the Army of Northern Virginia, the Confederate Army, General George Gordon Meade, who was the Union commander here at the Battle of Gettysburg. And this battle, as you probably know, was in July of 1863, about in the middle of the war. The war had been going on over 2 years. All the battles taking place below the Mason-Dixon line, a lot of them in Virginia, in the Eastern Theater and other southern states. And so this unique battle in that it was the largest, 3 days, and that it had the most casualties, 51,000, and a casualty is killed, wounded, captured, or missing. So anybody taken out of the battle, taken out of the fight, because of the battle was a casualty, not just killed. And because it was on northern soil and people in the north could witness firsthand the destruction, the horror of war. And so people were visiting Gettysburg to try to find loved ones. There were photographers, as you probably know, who took pictures of the aftermath or the consequences of battle. And they had no idea that the war was going to last this long, and they had no idea when it was going to end. And so people were getting a little frustrated. And there was a growing, with this guy right here, okay? So Lincoln, who now we know is a great president, he was a war president. People, war is too long. There's too much death. There's too much destruction. We're tired of it. Nothing is worth it. Let's end the war, split into 2 countries, the United States of America and the Confederate States of America. But more fighting and killing and destruction. And so that's really why Lincoln came to Gettysburg months after the battle in November of 1860. He came to deliver a brief speech, just 10 sentences, 272 words, that he knew would get taken down by newspaper reporters and disseminated across the country. And in that speech, he was trying to get people to understand why we had to finish the war and why we had to win the war, why it was so important. And so what I want to do with the time that we have today is I want to kind of contrast a little bit what the war was like in 1861 when they thought it was going to be a quick war and everybody had war fever and they were very excited about it, and what it was like after this battle, and when people were starting to ask, a growing number of people were asking for an end to the war. So can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So let's transport ourselves. First of all, let me show you a little map so I can show you where I am. It's very artistic, okay? I'm very good at map making. Do you believe me? Check it out. The detail on this map will amaze you. Whoa. Impressive, right? Okay, so what you have here is a fish hook or a J, a reverse J. And that's the Union line of battle on July 2nd and 3rd. The arrows show you that as the men are all lined up, they're facing out this way because the Confederate line of battle is out and around them. And so my office and our visitor center complex is located inside the hook part. So there was no fighting back. There was a lot of troop movements to get men up to the front, reinforcements. There was a lot of wagons of wounded coming back to be treated at hospitals and inside barns and houses. But there was not any fighting back here where I'm at. But I'm in the mix, about a half mile or maybe less. Behind me is the National Cemetery, where a lot of the Union men were buried, where Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address. Culp's Hill. The Cemetery Ridge is off to my right, where the men were fighting up, where the battle concluded, was about right here, Pickett's Charge. And Little Round Top is up at the end, the high ground at the far end of the Union line, where this is a major battle action as well. And so today it's really crowded. There's about, I don't know, probably 75 buses out my one window of school kids. As a matter of fact, I just ran to the restroom between programs because sometimes it's the group restroom out here, and I sometimes can't make it in. There's so many kids here on their field trip. But even though people come here in person on their field trip, and they come here on their family trip or what have you, and they study the 3 days of battle, they very rarely have a real understanding of why it was important. And I think it's important to study and look at the consequences and to ask ourselves that focus question of, was all the death and destruction of the Civil War necessary to achieve the war's goals? So let's transport ourselves for a minute back to 1861 when the war begins. And there's posters like this in all the different towns and counties. Red, white, and blue posters that list the names of colonels of regiments that they're going to come to town, and they try to company of men in each town. And 10 companies of 100 men make up a full regiment of 1,000 men. And people were excited. They were only being asked to join up in 1861 for 90 days, a 3-month enlistment to suppress the rebellion. And they had no trouble. President Lincoln had no trouble getting the 75,000 men that he needed. So they took a quick physical exam. They took the oath of allegiance, and then they went off to learn how to load and fire their musket rifles. So we're going to do those 3 things here very quickly. So who here would like to serve as my medical officer today? Somebody who maybe wants to be a doctor or a nurse when you're older.
Look at all of you.
It's a really simple job. You just have to inspect the troops as I administer the physical exam.
Right here. Cody, right here. Yeah.
Go on the other side of the room over there.
Cody?
Yep.
Right here.
Cody's going to do it? Great. Okay, Cody, I'm gonna run everybody through 5 or 6 steps of a typical 1861 medical exam. You only have to inspect them to make sure that they can last for 90 days, because we don't think they'll last very long. We don't think there's going to be a very high cost of war. We think it's going to be over after just a major battle, and so we're going to run them very quickly. Now, there were about 100 women that go up who passed this physical exam and snuck into the armies. So you know it can't be that tough. So quickly, quietly, and carefully, when everybody stand in place and push your chairs in. Okay, and Cody's gonna be watching to make sure everybody's following my instructions, and he's gonna let me know if he thinks anybody shouldn't get to join the Army today. Okay, the first thing he's gonna ask is for everybody to go like this and show their teeth. Okay, and in particular, he needs to see 2 opposing teeth. That means a strong one on the top that sits opposite a strong one on the bottom at a time when you didn't brush your teeth a lot. You never went to a dentist. That was unheard of. And does anybody know why you needed 2 strong opposing teeth? You needed 2 strong opposing teeth because your bullets, your mini balls, which look like this, are wrapped inside a piece of brown paper along with the gunpowder. And it has a brown paper tail sticking off of it. And every time you want to load and fire your musket, you have to be able to bite off that brown paper, spit it out, and pour the bullet and gunpowder into the barrel of your weapon. So Cody's making sure that you have opposing teeth. Does everybody look all right, Cody? Everybody okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. The next thing that Cody will say is, everybody wiggle your fingers. Sometimes you'd be missing tips of fingers from farming accidents or factory accidents. And in particular, which is the most important finger for a soldier? Your pointer finger. You have to be able to fire your musket rifle by pulling the trigger finger. Okay? You gotta check. Okay, next thing is, he needs to see you move your arms. You got to be able to get your knapsack up. You have to be able to load and fire your 10-spin musket rifle. You have to have some level. Okay, now we're going to take the eye exam. It's very difficult. Everybody look up at me for a minute. How many fingers am I holding up?
12.
That's the eye exam. Now, can everybody hear everything I've said?
Yes.
How about now?
Yes.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay, you passed the hearing test. Now, our last test will measure your endurance and also your ability to follow orders. You have to halt when I say company halt. All right? Company, march in place. Faster.
Yes.
Move it. Excellent, excellent. Cody, if it's okay with you, I'd like to allow them all to join the Army. Is that all right? Okay, well, you can pull the ones out that you don't think belong, but everybody else is going to raise your right hand and going to repeat the oath of allegiance after me. I do solemnly swear.
I do solemnly swear.
That I will bear true allegiance.
I will bear true allegiance.
To the United States of America.
To the United States of America.
I will serve them honestly and faithfully.
I will serve them honestly and faithfully.
Against all enemies and opponents.
Against all enemies and opponents.
And I will observe and obey the orders.
I will observe and obey the orders.
Of the officers appointed over me and the President of the United States, rules of the armies, of the United States, so help me God.
United States, so help me God.
Yeah, for the Union, hip hip, hooray! Okay, carefully silence. Training camp. You would not get as much training as you needed, but basically, before you had to go into a battle, but basically, a training camp is going to teach you how to effectively load and fire 3 aimed shots a minute out of your musket rifle, and then to be able to, now that you can work individually without thinking about it, because when you're being fired upon in battle, you're not going to have time to think about this. You have to do this very quickly. And then you have to learn how to move as a group in 2 ranks, a front rank and a rear rank. This is a Pennsylvania regiment. Shoulder to shoulder, arms touching, connecting with other regiments in a line of battle so that whatever command you're given, you can move as one like a snake to get up into the right position to force the enemy back or to push through them. And so not allowing the enemy to break this lineup is a very, very important part of soldiering in the Civil War. And so you have to learn all kinds of fighting and moving maneuvers. Now this musket rifle is about 10 pounds. I'm 5'4", and it comes up to just about my shoulder, okay? It's fairly heavy. They're carrying a total of probably 40 extra pounds of equipment. They're marching everywhere on foot. They're foot soldiers in the infantry. And every single time they want to load and fire this, they have to take that paper cartridge, rip it open, spit it out, put the bullet and the gunpowder down into the barrel of the gun, pull out the ramrod, which is very long and unwieldy, flip it around, pack everything down in there nice and tight, remove the ramrod, flip it back around very quickly, put it into its position with your pinky. Always use your pinky because it fires and you pull off your pinky. That's all right. You still have your index finger. Then you take a cap. You position the cap right here below the hammer of the rifle. When you get the order to ready, aim, fire. And I fired a Civil War musket rifle before, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that the butt of the gun has to be positioned firmly against your shoulder because this will kick. And if you're not careful, you're going to fall down in front of all your college interns. Not that that happened to me, but that's what happened. So then you're going to pull this trigger. The hammer's going to go down on that cap because a chemical in it that makes a spark. If you've packed it in there correctly, the spark catches onto the gunpowder and propels the mini ball out of your musket rifle. So the mini ball looks like this. It's conical shape. It's got grooves in the bottom of it that align with grooves on the inside of the barrel, and that causes that to spin. So this is the most deadly thing in the Civil War. Next to, second only to sickness and disease at a time when they didn't know about germs and antisepsis and things that we know about today. So the type of damage that this causes it shatters bones, for example. So how many of you have ever broken a bone and had it reset? Okay. So, oh wow, you guys are less clumsy than the first group of students. They had a lot, I think a lot more broken bones. So you had it break and it was set and it's healed. You can't really, one of the reasons why amputation or removing an arm, a leg, a hand, or a foot was so common at that time is because the type of wound mini ball that a mini ball caused. You also had canister rounds. This is a real canister ball found in the fields after the Battle of Gettysburg. It It's about the size of a golf ball. There are 30 of them or so in a container, comes out of the barrel of the cannon, and the container falls apart, and these go flying into the oncoming group of soldiers like a giant shotgun. You have a solid shot, which might look like this. This is a sabot that it's attached to. This falls apart. This is to go into the end or the flanks of a unit. If it was hollowed out inside as soon as gunpowder, that's called exploding shot. And then you have something called a shell, which is about sometimes 12 pounds. This one is a replica that's very light, but the real one would be very heavy. It would have a tiny fuse in it. When the fuse goes off, this breaks off into like jagged shell fragments, iron pieces like this one. The point of here took many men out of the battle as possible before that line of soldiers makes it to your line. Again, all those things buttoned up together don't come close to the amount of damage done by the mini ball, that conical shaped rifled bullet. And so in the first 2 years of the war, again, most of the battles are taking place in the South. The Confederate Army is almost always outnumbered, and yet they almost always win those battles. And the farmers in the South and the people in the South, they understand the destruction of war. They're getting it firsthand. It was only with the Battle of Gettysburg where people in the North were seeing photographs of how awful war and its aftermath were. Here's one example of a French grave that the burial detail had taken as they were trying to go around and find the trench graves left after the battle, trying to identify those dead, remove them from the battlefield, and reinter them or rebury them in the Soldiers' National Cemetery, where Lincoln was going to give his Gettysburg address. So they're seeing things like this for the first time. Farmers have lost their crops. People were probably initially in some shock around here. People in the North, they didn't think the war would ever come this far north. And they want an end to it. And so they say, war is too awful, it's too destructive, the cost is too high, let's split into two countries and just end the war. And so that's what we're having you think about is, was the Civil War worth it? What did it accomplish? And could that have been accomplished without the loss of, over the course of the war, 700,000 lives? I'm going to open it up to you all for your questions or your thoughts on that question.
Okay, we're going to start with Ella here for questions. Okay, Ella, come on up.
I'll just write them down, so just give me a second. I like to write down your good questions.
Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Ella, and my question is, was Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address his most inspiring speech?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, so these are some of the questions.
Yes, from last time. Yes.
Okay, I hope I answer them. Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, the most inspiring. Okay. As I told the other class, I have to say yes because I work and live in Gettysburg, right? But I think it's probably the most inspiring. It's a very sad speech because he's answering the question of why did my husband or my son or my father, why are they gone? Why are they dead? Why are we still fighting in this war? And so I think the Gettysburg Address, coming on the heels of the Emancipation Proclamation, really kind of take the war and say, this is not just a war to keep a country together. This is a war to determine if this type of country, based on the idea that all of us are created equal, can survive. It's a very short speech. So I think other speeches, like Lincoln's second inaugural, might have more poetic nuggets in it that might be inspiring, but I don't hear very many speeches quoted as often as I hear segments of the Gettysburg Address, even today. A country of the people, by the people, for the people. There's certain phrases in the Gettysburg Address that still remain when our country goes through great tragedies, referred to it in very inspiring. So I would say yes.
Okay, number 2. Okay, Sarah, nice and loud.
Okay. Hello, my name is Sarah. My question is, did many of the bodies at Gettysburg have to be reburied because the graves were too shallow?
Yes, well, the idea of creating a national cemetery was new. So at the other battles, the battles were on enemy, so it was very hard to cover the Union bodies. This battle, the troops, they had a theory back then called noxious effluvia, which sounds fancy, but it simply meant, at a time before they knew about germs and things, that they had to cover the bodies with dirt to keep smells down. That if you could keep the smell down, then ward off a health crisis. So if you could stay away from the smells and air, that you would be doing them. Now that being said, the army quickly, they put a little bit, maybe a foot of dirt or on top of their they had to move on. They didn't know when the next battle was going to be. People who came into town, they said, you've ever driven by like a dead raccoon or something on the road, and you know how awful that smells. Now you have to multiply that by about 7,000 dead, hundreds of dead, and you couldn't take the air. They had to put perfume on a cloth and cover their mouth and nose just to be able to kind of breathe in the air. So yes, they had to rebury them. Number one, to make sure nobody else is going to get sick, to try to get rid of that. And number two, it becomes now important that they have a proper grave where their family members can come and pay their respects. So there was a need, and then there was a greater desire to create a national cemetery and a final resting place.
Okay, number 3. Loud and slow.
Okay.
My name is.
My name is Riley, and my question is, did any one side have the higher ground advantage?
Yes, the Union on the second and third day of the battle had the higher advantage. So if you look at my map, my really awesome, cool map, okay, again, the first day of the battle takes place way out here out of town, off this map. And the Confederates, and they forced the army to retreat. And the town of Gettysburg is just in this direction, not very far at all. And retreated through the town, and they came up here to Cemetery Hill, and they stopped. They said, hey, we want the high ground. We want the high ground because you can put your cannon up there, you can defend it better. So Cemetery Hill becomes a key defensive position on the second and third day. Culp's Hill is behind it. That's another thing. The Confederates are coming from out in this direction, trying to attack, because they're going to have to attack if we have the high ground. Cemetery Ridge is sort of a slightly higher elevation, but not a hill by any means. And then you have Round Top and Big Round Top at the other end. So they have the high ground at the two ends of the line. And they can move, they have a more compact line where wherever the Confederates attack along this line, they can quickly move reinforcements between, back behind the line and between the battle areas, the skirmish areas. So definitely the Union had the high ground advantage, and they had the home ground advantage. They're defending Pennsylvania, Union State, for the first time.
Okay, number 4. Again, slow and loud. My name is.
My name is Brendan, and my question is, which of the 3 days had the greatest loss of life?
Okay, July the 2nd had the greatest loss of life. So July the 1st was kind of, the troops were coming into town. There were Union cavalry fighting against Confederate infantry, waiting for more troops to get into town. So, and July the 3rd, which was probably the most dramatic, Pickett's charge, where the Confederate Army tried to attack the center of the line to break through, is it's probably thought by many to be the most dramatic. The battle ended after the 3rd, but it was really July the 2nd when the Confederates attacked the high ground at both ends that caused the most loss of life. There was what they called an en echelon, kind of like a domino series of attacks by the Confederates against the line. General Dan Sickles had moved his men out beyond the ridge, which exposed some flank movements. There was some really desperate fighting, really desperate fighting out here on that day. And so July the 2nd was the deadliest day. Now, I think you guys probably read some things about a soldier from the 1st Minnesota named Philip Hamlin.
Yes.
Philip Hamlin is my favorite soldier. He survives by the 2nd. His unit, his one regiment of 72, had to fight off, close the gap against 2 brigades of Confederates. And he survives that day, the deadliest day, being in a unit that took the highest number of percentage of casualties, but only to be killed on July the 3rd. So his story is a very sad one, I think, to me.
Okay, number 5. Come on, say it. Slow and loud, all the way up. Okay. No, like real there. Go.
Hi, my name is Monse, and do you have any other journals and diaries from that time period, or do these best reflect the two sides?
I think journals and diaries are really important, but sometimes the journals that the soldiers kept record things like, we marched 20 miles today, just kind of thing, the weather's really hot, just kind of the basic things. Oftentimes, the thing that tells us the most are letters written to or from soldiers. That tells you, sometimes they're not telling you battle specifics because they don't want their families to worry about them, but they're telling what's on their mind. They're asking about what things are going on at home. There's one soldier who's buried here in the National Cemetery who asks about, he writes to his sister and he says, I can't wait to get home and have a snowball fight with you. Of course, he never made it for that, but the letters remind us, these were real people who weren't that much different from us at all. They lived at a time before cell phones and even electricity and all of that, but they had the same thoughts, feelings, and emotion. And so, yeah, we do have transcriptions of a lot of journals and diaries, but I think the most telling and informative and things are the letters.
Okay, next question, number 6. Okay, Kim, slow and loud. Tell her who you are.
Hello, my name is Kimberly. My question is, how were the soldiers who were killed in the battle identified?
Okay. I'm going to show you a poster. This was called a broadside, Kim, and everybody.
Yes.
It was put up after the battle, and this is an exact replica of what they look like. It says proposals for the removal of the dead on the Gettysburg battlefield. And it says they're taking proposals for 2 things. Number 1, for disinterring the bodies on the Gettysburg battlefield. That means, and at the hospitals, that means going out, finding those trench graves that are like 2 under of dirt on top. So disinterring, digging those up, and removing them to the soldiers' cemetery on the south side of the borough of Gettysburg. So putting them in wagons and getting them in, either sending them home if the family wanted their bodies home, or burying them here. They were creating a soldier cemetery. And number two, for digging the graves in the dead cemetery. So now they have to dig more graves and bury them, and then put the head markers on so their families know who they are. This doesn't say anything about identification, but that was part of it. They didn't wear dog tags in the Civil War. They were not assigned identification tags, although sometimes soldiers, their big fear was that, not that they would be killed, but that they would be killed and their family wouldn't know where their bodies were. So they sometimes bought from a sutler or a little shopkeeper who traveled with the armies identification tags. But more often than not, they would carve their initials on their musket rifle. They would have it in their pocket, would have their unit on. They might write, just like go through, if I would have one of you, I might be able to who you are and where you're from, like with your wallet. Or that's how they had to do it. There were mistakes, and there are 979 complete unknown soldiers who just have a number. But out of about 3,400 soldiers, they were able to identify the majority.
All right, number 7. Okay, real long.
Hi, my name's Tim.
Okay, but 3 times louder. Go.
Hi, my name's Tim, and can you help explain Sid Carter's point of view of the definition of a free home as he was a slave owner?
Yes, that's a very good question. Okay, so if you read his letters, he says, "Kiss the dear little ones for me. If I never see them again, tell them I'm fighting to leave them a free home." But he also owned other human beings. He owned slaves. So what did freedom mean to Sid Carter, is your question? Well, freedom to Sid Carter, I think, meant freedom for the white males. Okay? Freedom for the state. His state was South Carolina. And at that time, South Carolina was not just his state, that was his country. That was his home. And he wanted state laws. He didn't feel, I'm imagining, that anybody as far away as Washington, D.C. could understand the issues involved in him taking care of his family and his farm. He would have viewed his slaves as property. And so property was protected against in the Constitution. So when President Lincoln comes to Gettysburg to deliver his Gettysburg Address, and he begins that Gettysburg Address with this line, 407 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He is referring to the Declaration of Independence. Sid Carter may have argued that the country began with the Constitution, because his view of slavery was that my state, my home is my state, and nobody should state, and nobody in Washington, D.C. should tell me to do. Lincoln is saying the Declaration of Independence says that all men are created equal, and that means black or white. And eventually, with the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, that's going to mean men and women as well.
All right, here we go. Next question.
Okay, so my name's Vanessa, and my question was, we noticed mass destruction. Can you help us understand when soldiers sequester a home or property for war use when they can't leave it in the same condition as when they took over?
Okay, that's a good question, and it brings up a lot of things, and I like that question so much that I might use these for other schools. Done a good developing them. So today, when we think of this right around Gettysburg, they see a very clean, well taken care of, I hope, national park, and they can't imagine the destruction, the chaos, the horror of that. So just to give one example, There was a family that lived at the base of Big Round Top, below a place called Devil's Den, named the John Slider family. They had an 88-acre farm where they grew and raised livestock for what they needed for the year, a self-sustaining farm. They put in damages after the battle. We lost our wheat crop, we lost stock, we lost beehives, we lost our smoked meats, etc. Here's what it was all worth. You need to pay us for that. The money, because the Confederate army had damaged. The Confederate had cost, again, shoulder to shoulder. This is the Union. They also, units hooked up and shoulder to shoulder, came across their farm, knocked down the fences, trampled down the wheat. They connected during the attack to save lives and didn't break through. When they break through, they have to treat further trampling the wound, using the Sliders barn as a hospital, their sheets for bandages, eating their food, they're hungry, they battle. And then they have to, after July 3rd, get out. The Union Army's gonna follow them. There's no time to stay and clean up, and you can't clean up and just up anyway or recover livestock that's either escaped because it's down or eaten. And so war is an destructive time, chaotic time, and the people have been recovered a little bit. For example, if the medical corps needed hay to bed down the soldiers, they would pay the farmers for some hay, and so the farmers would probably jack up the cost of that hay because they're trying to recover and feed their families. But there was really, it's very difficult for us to understand that, but there was really no time specific back where it was not like the gladiators. They used road networks to find each other and fought on open ground. And so there was no time or much effort that they were able to clean up.
Okay, number 9. Is this the one you wanted?
Yeah, we changed it.
No, they changed number 10. Oh, sorry. Okay, how did photographers at the time photograph events and people and share them?
How did photographers at the time photograph them? Oh, photography was pretty new. They took a long time to set up shots, and nobody could move when they were capturing the light and trying to get those images, and then it took them a long time to develop them. Just to give you one example, this is a picture that I had taken of myself with a Civil War camera, and I had to sit like that for about 5 minutes while they took that photo. And if I would have moved it all, it would have just been a blur. So it's not like cell phones today where you can just snap a quick shot. So photographers would come in here at Gettysburg. This was and so they can snap pictures and take pictures to try to get those images across the North so people can really understand how awful war was. But they're not taking photographs during battle. But one thing they did they had illustrators or artists who were employed by newspapers, and those illustrators would sketch very quickly different scenes in camp or on the battle, and we can learn actually a lot from those sketches. That was another tool that they got information out for people who wanted to know about the war.
Okay, number 10.
We switched question 10 on your sheets, guys, a little bit, so you'll have to write down the new question.
Okay, now nice enough. Tell her who you are.
Hi, my name is Abby. And my question is, do you have any examples of the equipment used in amputations?
Yes. Hold on a second, I'm going to grab it.
So the question was, do you have any equipment used for amputation?
the surgeon's amputating kit. It's a wooden box. It has 3 levels to it. A surgeon would provide his own. He would almost always have an amputating kit because he knows that an amputation is going to be the most common surgery. Probably 75% of the time, he's going to be using his amputating kit the most because of the type of wounds caused and because of what they knew medically at the time. So some of the things are a bullet probe. This is what you see here. It's a long instrument with a rounded tip that used to be covered in porcelain. And it was covered in porcelain so that you could hear it when you found the bullet. There wasn't an exit wound. You got to find the bullet. You have to extract the bullet with your bullet forceps. And then you can assess the damage done to the tissues and everything in the bone and whether or not you need to amputate. To amputate, I've had some surgical nurses and doctors here before on medical programs, and it's a very similar process today, except that today the patient is hooked up to instruments for the administering and monitoring of their anesthesia. Back then they did administer anesthesia, but basically assessing the height and weight just visually of the patient. And you clean everything. You have antisepsis. You make sure everything is sterilized. And the only other thing is when you get down to the bones, you have scalpels that incise the skin. You have larger knives to incise the muscle, for example. And you have an amputating saw or a capital saw to cut through the bones. And today, to get through the bones, they have something that kind of looks like metal dental floss to go underneath the bone and cut through. But back then they had what was called the capital saw. So those are some of the instruments here in my handy amputating kit.
How many soldiers died because of the amputation and maybe not from the wound itself? Do you know?
Like from what we now know as infection.
Yes.
Yeah. Statistics are very, very difficult in the Civil War. They didn't have computers, and it's hard to assess that outright. So I don't have a number for you, but there were over 1 million amputees over the course of the war. They would be fit with a prosthetic limb, which was really not functional. It was so it was affecting them for the rest of their lives. But there are other things, like we know of soldiers, for example, who have a head wound. They survive the battle and even the war, which is amazing because head wounds were 90% fatal at that time. But then the one gentleman I'm thinking of, he had what they call convulsions, sometimes twice a day for the rest of his life. So he can't hold down a job. He is very addicted to alcohol for the pain. He's tremulous, they described him. So it's really ruined his life, and he does eventually complications of that wound, but maybe it's 15 years later. So you don't really hear about it, but so individual stories like that, but I don't have specific numbers.
Sure. Okay, number 11.
What's that?
Here's another question. All right, here we go.
Okay. Hello, my name is Carmilla. My question is, how did the families deal with the loss of their loved ones?
That's a really good question. They, well, I guess like today, every family dealt with it a little bit differently. I think that the National Cemetery is really important, that they would have go and pay their respects if they could make it to Gettysburg. A lot of times they would put in for a pension. Their loved ones' Army pay had supported them, and so they put in for a pension, and they might get some money to them continue to eat. But I'm sure it was a case by basis, very difficult for each family.
Okay, and the last question. Come on, Joe.
I think we have time for one more question, and then fortunately, whatever, I'm going to go out and fulfill a group of students who were able to come here. I wish it was you guys.
Well, we wish too. Okay, Joe, last question.
Hello, my name is Joseph, and my question is, how are you able to acquire letters from soldiers whom had fought at Gettysburg?
That's a great question. I love that as the final question. Well, there's all different ways. Sometimes people find collections of letters like in their attic or something like that, and they either will donate them or they will make copies of them or transcribe them so that we can have them in our research library. Sometimes they're collections in state historical societies. A lot of times, some of like a lot of the letters, the Hamlin letters came from Minnesota State Historical Society. But a lot of times you can find these letters in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. And what you do is you ask to see the pension file. And it's really cool. If you ever get to do this, you go in, you ask for the soldier's pension file. And they don't bring copies of the letters. They bring out the actual letters, often in the actual envelopes that they were sent in. You can't take pens in. You have to be really careful with them. But the reason they have them is because if I say I lost my husband in the Civil War, in order to get the pension, I have to prove that I was supported by his Army pay. And one of the ways they prove that is they would send a letter in, and it would maybe say at the bottom, enclosed is $5 to use on the farm. And that's how they would prove it. And so then they now have pension offices back. Clara Barton worked at a pension office at one point. No, I might have that wrong. But anyway, and they would collect them. They would have them there, and that's a really exciting way. And so we try to house copies or transcripts of any soldier whose letters have been found that are about soldier life or the Gettysburg battling campaign.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time today. Let's give her a round of applause.
I'm very sorry that I messed up the time thing, and your classes were terrific. I thank them so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.